Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes our podium ceremonies. We're going to ask you to step back. Drivers, man your vehicles, please. We're going to now operate all of these vehicles in honor and tribute to all those who have served.
Attempt to do that. I want to welcome all our viewers here today, the people who have stayed for our ceremony here honoring the veterans of the War on Terror. Thank you so very much. These vehicles, this is called the WC-56, part of the Dodge family of vehicles. This was used literally for that in one sense, a command car, so VIPs, generals, middle-level field officers would use this vehicle to visit the troops, reconnoiter. It was used as a radio van. It was used as all kinds of things. So this, and by the way, that was one of the keys to American victory in World War II. The commonality of vehicles, using a particular vehicle and chassis over and over again for different tests. Right behind it is an M3 white scout car. Take a good look at this vehicle. This was probably obsolete as far as American usage right around 1942, 1943, but our allies used it to the end of the war, and it's just that. It's a scouting vehicle. Take a look at that and think, in a couple of minutes you're going to see our half-track. Take a look at the similarity between that vehicle and the half-track. Here we're jumping up into the 1960s, 1970s, a vehicle used quite prominently in Vietnam. That is a V-100. Called the Commando. It was often used for convoy support, convoy escort in Vietnam. Here is our M8 and our other M8. These vehicles were used for heavy reconnaissance. Initially they were to be used as tank killers, but by the time they took the field, the 37mm gun installed within was not quite sturdy enough or strong enough to oppose German armor. So they were reverted to the combat reconnaissance role. Now here's that vehicle I was talking about. So if you look at the front of it, it's essentially that M3 scout car that we talked about, but chopped off and tracks put in the back. Hence the name half-track. Wheels in the front and tracks in the back. So again, that's the kind of the commonality idea of American armor in World War II. And speaking of armor, here's an M18 half-track. This was a tank destroyer. 76mm gun up front, very lightly armored, although heavily armed. And that was part of its appeal in that it was very fast, used a tactic called shoot and scoop. Here's a vehicle that may be not as glamorous as tanks, but it's a recovery vehicle. All these vehicles, at some point in their life, had to be repaired, either by they were damaged by enemy fire or mechanical problems. A vehicle like that would tow them off the battlefield. Here's one of our flight droids. This is an M48 patent tank, one of the first in the patent line. This is in Israeli colors. Israel used this tank in both the 67 and 73 fighting. So here's our command car again. Our white scout car. See the vehicle, the device on the front? That's called an anti-ditching roller. That helped it traverse an undulating battlefield, shell holes, trenches, things like that. So if it encountered an opposing slope, theoretically it would help it push up the opposing slope. Is Mr. Tom Stark driving our V-100. Again, this vehicle was used in Vietnam to escort convoys bringing ammunition, food, supplies, to far-flung fire bases and helicopter bases in South Vietnam, protecting those convoys against Viet Cong attack. So here come our two M8s again. Our little M5, I think I just joined the parade. There's our M5 super tank, outgrowth of the M3 tank. Modernization of that. Here's our M20, a version of that M8 scout car with those two scout cars that you saw pass by. That also was a command and control type vehicle. You can see how open it is. So a field commander would have a very good view of what was going on in the battlefield and direct operations there. There goes our half-track again. And by the way, when we get some of these vehicles out of line, that half-track will be giving rides. If you look down off to your left, you see a green tent down there. There goes our M18 Hellcat again. Now you get a chance to talk. This is an M26A1 Dragon. this is something very surprising. Goes our Dodge Command car again, the WC-56. By the way, that whole series, the WC series, were the forerunners of the Dodge Power Wagon, one of my favorite vehicles. And here comes our B100, also known as 706, M706. A lot of these vehicles survived because after the Vietnam War, a lot of them went to, of course, our allies, as so many other vehicles do, but also they went to law enforcement organizations for SWAT teams. Comes our M5 again. This M5 originally had two Cadillac V8 engines in it. This has been re-engined with two Chevy small blocks. It is. Let's get our M20 and our M3A1 half-track. By the way, we have another half-track. Unfortunately, it's down with some transmission problems right now. But that will be rejoining the fleet. And if you're asking or wondering where our Sherman tank is, that too is down for repairs, unfortunately, but we have a wide opening. We intend to get it back on late this fall or during the winter. It'll certainly be back in action for our shows next year. That Dragon Wagon, Dave's Dragon Wagon, you see that crane up on top. That is not part of the recovery gear for that vehicle. In fact, that tire is so large, depending on that vehicle, that it's virtually impossible to get them off, muscle them down by hand. So really, that crane on top, that derrick exists solely to get that the spare tire off onto the ground so it can be changed. Monster rubber. On these vehicles are some members of our sister group. These vehicles are being driven by museum volunteers, but our sister group, our very closely related organization called Long Island Living History Association. Those are the reenactors who portray armored infantry here at the museum. Theirs are called LILA, Long Island Living History Association. A lot of the crew members in this vehicle are the LILA folks, so give them a good round of the hand. So they're a separate organization. If you were really into reenacting or living history, as we call them now, those are the people to see. If you're interested in seeing or volunteering with the museum, being a docent or being a mechanic to work on these fantastic vehicles, that would be Museum of American Armor, and you can see me before that. And our M18 Hellcat. We've got a wonderful crew that's driven by Mr. Mike Justin right now. They have a dedicated crew. I know some of their other crew members are screwing about these other vehicles driving to a very talented bunch of guys. That's Dave Bibby in Dragon Wagon. There's M26. Actually, when the M26 is mated with the trailer, the M15 trailer becomes an M25 Dragon Wagon in its whole. It's interesting on that, all these vehicles, we can talk about them in more detail a little bit later on. The reason the United States did so well and became what Franklin Delano Roosevelt called the arsenal of democracy is because we mobilized the automotive industry in World War II. So vehicles like our the M8s, the M20s you just saw go by, they were made by Ford Motor Company. The M18, which we're just parking right now, that's that big tank destroyer. That was made by Buick Motor Car Company, believe it or not. So in 1944, you couldn't buy a Buick to drive you around town or go to the candy store, but you could buy yourself a Hellcat. So automotive industries were engaged in building weaponry, and they were able to adapt so quickly that the United States became a major producer of armaments, not only for ourselves, but as FDR said, an arsenal of democracy. So arming the United States troops, but also our allies, the Commonwealth nations, Britain, and of course Russia too. But that Hellcat again, just as it makes a good demonstration, it's built by Buick. The gun, that big 76 millimeter gun, was built by Oldsmobile.